Hey folks, today's episode is brought to you by those people over at the Indie Gaming Collective as they provided the review key to expedite, well, this review. I stress expedite because this one has been a long time coming, given I've been closely following it since I tried the demo. Now, I'm referring to Afterburner Studios' action roguelite Dreamscaper. That said, in a market rife with other action roguelites, do I think Dreamscaper is able to carve out a niche in the gaming landscape, or is it a pipe dream at best? I'm your host Arlyeon, let's find out together. Sometimes a fresh start can feel necessary. Enough memories accumulate somewhere that an escape is the only thing you can look forward to. It's these sort of feelings that lead Cassidy to moving to the city of Redhaven, leaving her to juggle the rigors of work and socializing in a brand new place. That said, outpacing the past isn't so easy, and her daily dreams more than hammer that point home. Thankfully, Cassidy is a bit more of an active dreamer than most, something which offers her the opportunity to overcome both ancient anxieties and fresh fears. So, synopsis aside, I found Dreamscaper's story to be fairly enjoyable, though it does take a bit of legwork to see everything. Part of this is because, while there are central scenes which will unfurl as you progress deeper and deeper into Cassidy's unwaking world, there's also a whole lot of peripheral elements to pursue. Some of them are simple enough, like interactable lore points that provide Cassidy the opportunity to reminisce and further flesh herself out. These points are incidentally unique, and once you've found a specific one, it won't pop up again even in future runs, though you can poke your journal to pore over the ones you've found. That said, the most involved bit of storytelling, that doesn't entail violence, is Dreamscaper's social system. Yeah, when you're not kicking ass in lucid dreams, you'll be hopping around the real world for a variety of reasons, amongst which is Cassidy's awkward attempts at not being a hermit. And honestly, talking to Dreamscaper's cast of characters makes for some decent downtime between deep dives into dream dungeons. I found something soothing about sitting down to learn more about these characters, and by extension Cassidy through her interactions with them. And I just generally found Bruce a treat to talk to. That's not to say that there isn't some potential weirdness here. If you focus on finishing certain stories while neglecting others, there's definitely moments where you can wind up with some odd narrative elements, and that difference in progression is likely to happen given that friendship isn't some magical process. There's also some grinding involved. See, becoming acquaintances with people is easy, but beyond that, you'll probably want to start crafting gifts to help expedite the whole befriending thing. Gifts, however, not only require you to farm up the meta resource inspiration, they also involve finding out what people's hobbies and interests are so you can puzzle out the right items to throw at them. So, if you're intent on seeing what the game has to offer, you'll need to figure out and do this for all your potential pals, given that the ending is a bit lackluster until you do so. But take heart, your reward isn't just story bits. Getting closer to your chums also grants you their influences, which essentially translates into an assortment of buffs that become available as you gain friends and become stronger as your friendship deepens. Though, right, I suppose I ought to tackle that whole action combat roguelike part now. Not that Dreamscaper takes long to get into it. Heck, I was tossed into a pretty short and sweet tutorial within moments of starting the game. And yet, even with it providing me the basics, it took me a long while to actually fully grasp the nuances of what Dreamscaper had to offer, because there's honestly a lot of complexity. So, let's kick things off. First off, while I initially made the mistake of treating Dreamscaper like a simple hack and slash brawler, there's actually a lot going on combat-wise. For instance, each of the melee weapons you encounter feel different, with different attack speeds, ranges, and overall animations helping to provide them unique identities. It's actually to the point that I would overlook items that provided strictly numerical bonuses in favor of melee weapons like the Corrigan, a spear with a decent basic combo, but an awesome heavy attack that allows you to quickly get around the battlefield. Things like the overall speed and rhythm of a weapons combo also played a factor in my choice, given that Dreamscaper rewards players for properly timed button presses during one of those attack strings. You can tweak the time available for inputs with meta upgrades, but yeah, suffice to say, it definitely helped to inform my habits as far as snagging new weapons went. Not that I wasn't incentivized to dabble. After all, the various weapons you encounter also have mastery bonuses, permanent passive abilities these weapon types unlock, provided you spend time clearing enough rooms with them. And since you can't carry around extra weapons, I had to go out of my comfort zone and use all of them in order to get these unlocks. Admittedly, this did feel a bit rewarding, if only because it just made so many different synergies available. Some weapons gained extra burn duration, while other items gained extra burn damage, and just putting those things together, don't mind if I do. Also, the game actually had an update recently that grants you meta resources for mastering a weapon, just to really incentivize going out of your way to do so. Though, if we're getting back on the subject of synergies, it's not just melee items you'll be juggling. The ranged items are just as varied as their up-close and personal counterparts in their utility and function. Up to and including being able to squeeze out chunks of extra damage you can properly time charging your attacks. That said, while they are definitely a potent addition to your arsenal, they aren't without their limitations, given you actually have a stamina bar for ranged actions, which also happens to be shared with your block. And let me tell you, trying to parry an attack only to mess up the timing, block, and watch your guard get crushed because you already overtaxed yourself, and then get your face smashed in is... I mean, I recognize that I deserved it, but I didn't like it. Admittedly, the shields I've generally been a bit iffier on, not because they don't have utility. There's actually a few neat shields in the gamut, including a couple with absolutely stellar mastery bonuses or normal abilities, such as the one that allowed you to completely no-sell an attack every 20 seconds. That said, some of them felt bad. Anything that was a proc based off getting hit felt really bad, especially since blocking or parrying didn't seem to trigger those effects. Just... Not that parrying in itself is underpowered. The ability to stagger even bosses is great, as is reflecting projectiles back to their sender. This ability to reflect things is actually so powerful that it turns the first boss into a complete joke, which also helped to inform my shield choices since there's a shield that can't parry. That's not your only defensive option either, given you also have a gamut of evasive maneuvers you can choose between, such as the deliberately edgy shadow step, a fiery slide, and even a short and simple boxing weave. What surprised me about Dreamscaper was just the sheer variety in their uses and masteries made the choice between these feel legitimately genuine. Weave, for instance, is incredibly spammable, but the iframes on it are very low. That said, it also grants you a bonus for crit if you've mastered it. On the other hand, there's things like the fiery slide, which provides great distance and a mastery for burn duration, but a little bit lengthier of a recovery time. There's also Astral Step, which has decent iframes and moves you a fair distance, but has the absolute worst recovery time out of all of them. Oh, and yes, perfect dodging does have its perks, as it provides a brief slowdown effect and lets you cancel dodge frames to start up a new attack, which is seriously lit. Oh, but your myriad options, they don't even end there. Lucids are essentially abilities you can acquire, which, while less spammable than the rest of your arsenal, given they have cooldowns, the sheer diversity they offer allow you to make up for the weak points in your approach or to provide neat elements of utility like screen-wide freezes, a massive wall that can block projectiles, or just lots of damage with things like a tactical pyroclasm. Also, the simple fact that you can then equip any item you've discovered into your starting loadout is amazing, as it allows you to test out cohesive build ideas right from the get-go, or just rank up items you haven't mastered yet. It also means you're fairly empowered to abuse another element of Dreamscaper: critical extinguishes. This one took me a little bit to realize how gross these could get, but essentially when you hit enemies with an elemental effect, there's good odds you'll apply a debuff. That said, if you target them with a different element that would apply a different debuff, they don't stack. Instead, it clears off the elemental effects and massively amplifies the hit that triggers it. With the right weapon or Lucid, this gets to be chunky bits of damage just ranging in the thousands. Honestly, compared to the rest of this, your Lucid Awakening is a pretty basic mechanic to master. Whilst you can't change this element of your loadout, it's still quite potent, as it fully replenishes your stamina bar and then slows down time until it runs out. Which, in the right build, you can just utterly vaporize a boss battle. Before it can retaliate or even really start. The only limiting factor here is it requires you to clear 3 rooms before it recharges, so I still just saved it for the bosses most of the time. And by most of the time, I mean religiously. Anyways, once you have all of that out of the way, what's left is pretty straightforward. As you clear rooms, you'll get sand, which is a run-specific currency that you'll be mostly spending in shops. You'll also occasionally find chests with bits of gear, which comes in helpfully color-coded rarity systems. Shinier item, more affixes to play with. There's also keepsakes to find, which essentially provide a variety of buffs, with a subset providing powerful boons in exchange for downsides, such as losing the ability to dodge, but gaining move speed, health, and floor lava immunity. And there's also unique boss keepsakes, which help to incentivize you to do those fights, because as much as they provide a solid challenge at the end of each stage, you actually could skip those entirely once you've cleared them once. That said, I'd recommend against this, and not just because of the keepsakes. I mean, yes, because of the keepsakes, but also because they provide a lot of meta resources, and you will be needing heaps of those for whenever you die. Or clear a run, but realistically, your initial spending sprees are definitely going to be of the post-mortem variety. Anyways, as far as meta purchases go, you have a few flavors. There's Inspiration, like I said, for all your friendship bribery needs. Resolve, on the other hand, is oriented towards making resolutions for personal improvement. God damn it, I only got that now. Okay, stuff like increasing parry windows, your health, damage against bosses, and even starting with keepsakes or doubling meta resource gain until you get hit. They're great options. That said, there's also another one, a boss-centric currency called Sparks, which let you purchase brand new keepsakes and equipment to find. Equipment that you can then also disable from spawning if you regret your purchase after the fact. That said, not all the improvements are strictly aimed at you. Glass is specifically used for improvements in the dream world, like making shops more efficient or adding forge rooms, which is where you can upgrade your gear or alter weapon affixes. Plus, you can unlock the ability to tackle challenge rooms, where you have to do nonsense like clearing rooms without getting hit, or without using certain types of attacks in exchange for a shiny chest. Though, my favorite unlockable with glass is the puzzle rooms, which come in Minesweeper flavor and Pipeline puzzle flavor. Honestly, the former is generally more fun for me, since it definitely got a bit trickier the deeper you go and the harder the game gets, which, yeah, Dreamscaper has difficulty settings, known as intensity. Once you unlock these, it's actually a lot of fun because it's highly customizable. You're able to tweak individual elements to tailor the game to your liking. There's some great options in there too, such as being able to cause intensity-specific enemies to spawn, overall increasing their number and lethality. Bosses can be ramped up to have new movesets as well as just hitting you like a train. And you also have things like larger dungeon layout sizes, which I generally found to be a bit of a mixed blessing, until you realize that when you maximize that intensity option, it disables anything you spent in the meta upgrade for adding healing rooms. Anyways. But actually, anyways, it's neat stuff. But it's a segment of the game that you don't actually need to dabble into either if you don't want to, since your reward is primarily some cosmetic items being added to your room and just a greater drop ratio for the meta upgrades you find. Anything related to the actual ending of the game is specifically tied to just progressing the storylines with all of the side characters. But honestly, unlocking those things for your room was pretty. Those changes was nice, given the otherwise just disheveled look of the room. Sort of hits home in a this is a bit too real and sort of looks like what I leave behind. Don't like that. Honestly though, just the overall town of Red Haven, was nice to wander in as well, and I really enjoyed taking in its sights, even if all the NPCs are incredibly creepy, blank-faced mannequins. That said, as much as I was fond of the overworld, it's the dream world where things really pop off for me. Hell, some of the weapons I found are a visual treat, even if I despise the practical combat applications. But then we get to the region designs, the enemies, and the imposing bosses, and you're just in for a treat. Though my favorite segments are the final 2 dungeon floors. There's just something about their otherworldly appearance that I really enjoyed, especially with how different they felt compared to their companion stages. Also, the meta aesthetic of the tutorial level is great. And while I'm not going to showcase it in this review, because spoilers, there's definitely something to be said for a developer who can make the dying animation of the last boss feel like a horrible gut punch in tandem with the story. So, I'm just going to take solace in those sweet attacking animations instead. That or the soundtrack. I spent a lot of time going through Dreamscaper, and I never got tired of its music. Whether it's chill tunes when you're roving in town, or the epic tracks you get during combat or boss fights, there's a lot of variety here. Which, yeah, conclusion time. And I like Dreamscaper. I like it enough that once the 1.1 patch hits and introduces new items and gear to master and tinker around with, I'm diving right back into it. That's how much I enjoy its combat. And the story's no slouch either. I enjoyed having a protagonist who is simply trying her best to deal in her day-to-day life. Frankly, as someone else who grapples with glooms, I can certainly say I don't mind the way that it's presented in this game, and I appreciated how the more personal plot lines involving your companions evolve. Which, yeah, if you haven't guessed it by now, this is me very fervently stating my approval for Dreamscaper. It's a satisfying game which offers a lot to do and a number of mechanics to master. Ultimately, with the way I both binged it and spent time pestering my friends about it to go and play this fucking game, I'd be remiss if I called this game anything other than a crit hit. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you have an interest in supporting my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, or gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord, links in the description so you can be a part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. That said, I'll catch you in the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.